In this video, you're going to learn about image processing and manipulation with Node.js. And in this particular case, we're going to resize and convert our images. So everywhere in our user interface, we assume that the uploaded images are squares, so that we can then display them as circles like this. And so this only works when they are squares. But of course, in the real world, users are rarely going to be uploading images that are squares. And so our job now is to actually resize images to make them squares. Alright, and so here is how we're going to do that. We will add yet another middleware before the update me, and then that middleware will take care of the actual image processing. Alright, so actually let's do it here in the code right after this one, because they are kind of connected, aren't they? So exports.resize user photo. And before we continue, let's actually add this middleware to the middleware stack in this particular route. So that's in user routes. And so here, right after the photo has been uploaded in this middleware, we will then resize it. So resize, and here it's actually the user controller. All right, and let's actually go down here and going back. And so at this point here, we already have the file on our request, at least if there was an upload. And if there was no upload, then of course we don't want to do anything. And so that means that we want to go to the next middleware. So if there is no file on the request, then return right away and go to next. Okay, but otherwise, we of course then want to do that image resizing. And for that, we are going to use the sharp package. All right, so, well, first of all, let's actually install it. So npm install sharp. All right, and since that is doing its work, let's go ahead and put that here already. So sharp and require sharp. And sharp is a really nice and easy to use image processing library for Node.js. And there's really a lot of stuff that we can do with it, but where it really shines is for resizing images in a very simple way. And so that's exactly what we're looking for here. All right, so we say sharp, and then here we basically need to pass in the file. Now, when doing image processing like this, right after uploading a file, then it's always best to not even save the file to the disk, but instead save it to memory. And we already talked about that before, and so let's now actually do that in practice. Okay, so for that, we need to change a little bit our motor configuration, and actually just this motor storage. Because now, we no longer need any of this, and instead the motor storage will be simply motor.memory storage. And just like this. Okay, and so as I mentioned earlier, this way the image will then be stored as a buffer. And so that buffer is then available at request.file.buffer. And so this is way more efficient like this. So instead of having to write the file to the disk and then here read it again, we simply keep the image basically in memory, and then here we can read that. All right. Anyway, calling the sharp function like this here will then create an object on which we can chain multiple methods in order to do our image processing. And so the first one that we're going to do is resize. So resize, and then here we can specify the width and the height. And so let's say 500 and 500. So remember, we want square images, and so of course the height needs to be the same as the width. Now this will then crop the image so that it covers this entire 500 times 500 square. And actually we can change this default behavior if we wanted to. And so let's again take a quick look at the documentation. So let's say GitHub Sharp, but actually their own website is a bit better, a bit more complete. And so let's click that link here. And so then here we can come to resizing, which is what we're currently doing. And then here is what I was just talking about. All right, so the default here is that the image will be cropped in order to cover both the provided dimensions. But we could also choose contain, fill, inside, or outside. And we would do that by setting the options here. So we could set width, height, and then as a third option, we could set this options object where we could then define the fit. We could also define the position, which is center by default. And yeah, you see that there's all kinds of stuff that we could really define to fine-tune our image processing. But in this case, what we have is enough. And so let's move on to the next step. Because what I want to do next is to actually convert the images always to JPEG. Okay, and for that, we use toFormat and then JPEG. We can also then define the quality of this JPEG. So basically to compress it a little bit so that it doesn't take up so much space. And so for that, we use the JPEG method and set an option in this object with quality, and let's say 90% here. All right. So each method into its own line here. That's much nicer. But actually we're not done. We're almost done, but not entirely. Because now, in the end, we then finally want to write it to a file on our disk. And so for that, we can use toFile. Now this method here then actually needs the entire path to the file. So basically public images / users, and then finally here the file name. All right. So let's get that actually from what we had here before, because of course we want our images to have a similar format. All right. So let's copy that, but actually I will not put it right here. Instead, I will actually save it to request.file.filename. Now, why am I doing it like this? Well, it's because right now this file name is not defined. So when we decide to save the image into memory, so as a buffer, the file name will not really get set. But we really need that file name in our other middleware function, right? So that's down here in update me right here. So we rely on request.file.filename in order to save the file name into our database, right? And so actually we should define that. And so previously it was of course defined by the multi upload that we had, but since that is gone now, we should then basically redefine it here. Okay? Then here actually we can get rid of this part of the extension because we already know that it will always be a JPEG because of this toFormat. Okay? And so here we can simply put JPEG. So there's no need to get the file extension. And so now here we can then use that. So rec.file.filename. And that's actually it. Okay, so all we need to do now to finish is to then actually call the next middleware in the stack. And so that will be the update me handler function. So of course, let's now actually test that. So we no longer need this one. Let's come here to Postman. And now the user that I want to update is called Araf, I think. Let's take a look here at our dev data very quick. And so yeah, so this is the non-square image that we're going to be uploading now. And actually you see the size here, which is 1000 times 1500. And so let's later compare that with our resized uploaded image. All right. Anyway, let's now get the name for Araf. Or actually, we don't need. They're always the same. So Araf like this. So let's log in so that we can then update it. And you see that right now his image here is user 11. And just to see it a bit better, let's actually update, or let's actually log in into our web application using that user. So test 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So that is the current image. And now let's go ahead and update that. Select files. And here is our image. Open that and let's see what happens. And we're done. That was actually very quick. So let's see if it's correct. Well, at least the name here seems correct. If we take a look at our users now here, that's in public, or right here. So that should be the one. Actually, it's not. And actually, it's nowhere to be found. Let's reload. And here it is. Yeah, that's the one. So you see that now it's at 500 times 500. It's much smaller here. So 55 compared to the 315 we had before. So that's a lot better. And as you will see here, it should now be updated here as well. And that's perfect. So the face is actually right in the middle here. And so that resizing really went kind of perfect. Cool. And I hope you will find some use for this kind of image processing in your own applications as well. So just to quickly recap, what did we do here? Well, we created a new middleware function that is going to be running right after the photo is actually uploaded. And that upload is now actually happening to a buffer and no longer directly to the file system, right? And so that's why we used this memory storage here. But of course, this Molter filter here is still working. And so we can still only upload images. All right. So then here in that middleware, we put the image's file name on request.file.filename so that we can then use it in the update me route handler. All right. And then here we have the actual image processing itself, where we first resize it to a square and then format it to JPEG with a quality of 90%. And finally, we then write that file into our file system to the exact same folder that we specified also before. All right. So this is how it works when you need some image processing, but if you do not need it, then of course you can keep using it this way. Okay, and so that's really important that we learned how to do it in both ways here. All right, next up in the next video, we will then actually make this form here work so that we can upload the user photos directly from here.